I'd like to welcome Bree up here to read the Easter story from the Bible.
So this is from John 20, 1 through 17. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter, who was behind him, arrived and went into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. "Woman," he said, "why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God."
Hello. My name is Shobi. For 10 years, I was captain of the temple guard under Caiaphas, the high priest. Please, don't be afraid. I'm not here to arrest anyone. I've been asked by my friend Nicodemus to come and share with you that mysterious event that caused me and led me to leave that very lucrative and prestigious post. You see, I was handpicked by Caiaphas to be captain of the temple guards, and it was a position that I had great pride in. He handpicked me because I had shown great strength and courage in working with the crowds in the temple. And I had proven myself by my hard work and my duty. And I've come to share with you what would cause me to leave that prestigious post. You know, you would understand perhaps because of my position why I felt so insulted when Caiaphas ordered me to go and guard the tomb of a lowly carpenter from Nazareth. He directed me personally to go and guard the tomb. I was insulted. But then he shared with me that this man had reportedly performed miracles. And he had many followers. And he reported that this man had said that he would be crucified, and within 3 days, he would rise from the dead. And he told his followers the things that he had done and would do, they would do also, and even greater things. And so Caiaphas, not wanting to create a whole movement and not allowing this movement to go on, he wanted to make sure that his followers didn't come and steal the body and hide it, and then pretend that he had done as he said he would do. And so, understanding the importance of my mission, I selected 3 of my most experienced men. And we arrived at the tomb just at sunset, at the end of our Sabbath. And we went and checked to make sure that everything was as it should be. We checked the stone and made sure that it was in front of the tomb, and it was sealed. And just to make sure, we took ribbons and stripped them across the stone, and we put wax on either end, just to make sure that we would know if anything had been disturbed. And it was a chilly night that night, I recall, and I assigned the fire a duty to my men to make a fire for us, and I then assigned the hours of watch for each of my men. And I assigned myself the third watch. I'd earned a reputation with my men for fairness, that I would never assign them to do things that I wouldn't also do myself. So I assigned myself the third watch, and we had a fire going, and it was a cool night. And during the first watch, the first guard was on duty, and the other of us, we got in our blankets around the fire, and we slept. We slept. We were very weary that day. It was the Pentecost, and it was a day of a long day in the temple, and we were very tired and weary. So we took time to get some sleep, knowing that the one guard was standing in front of the tomb. Everything went fine. Everything was quiet for the first two watches. There was nothing. And then it was my turn. It was my watch, and something, though, happened that cut my watch short. I'll never forget it. You see, I was standing in my post, and I heard something. I heard a moaning. And I thought, oh, wow. What is that? It sounded like, I didn't know what it was. I was thinking maybe an animal, or perhaps one of my men was just having a bad dream. And it stopped, and I just kind of put it out of my mind. I thought, okay, well, it was my imagination, or it was the wind. I really didn't know what it was, but I just put it out of my mind. But then it came again, louder and louder. And I heard it. And as it grew, it sounded like someone moaning, even in pain. And I thought, what could this be? I remember thinking that, well, it must be an animal or something. And so I went to the fire, and I went and picked up a branch from the fire to use as a torch. And as I came back, I was looking all over the place. I looked the whole area, and I saw nothing. I thought maybe even a person had been injured somewhere, and I was just concerned that there was something there that I didn't see. But I looked everywhere. There was nothing. And I kept hearing it louder, though, and louder. And as I came closer to that great stone, there could be no doubt. It was coming from inside the tomb. And I was shocked, and I know that there have been times where such things have happened, that someone was inside the tomb, and I thought this man Jesus must not be dead. And I'd heard of such things happening before. But then I realized, no, he's been in there for 3 days. No one could survive without air in that tomb for that long. And as I put my ear to the stone to listen, the ground shook just for a moment. It didn't even disturb my men. And then it was quiet. It was a quiet beyond even silence. And it seemed like it lasted an eternity. And then I heard a crack from the fire, and I looked over and I noticed that the fire was going out. And I didn't want to be there in the dark, so I went back over to the fire, not 10 paces away. And as I went back over to the fire to put some wood on the fire, I heard footsteps behind me. And I turned quickly, and I unsheathed my dagger, and I assumed the battle crouch. And there, between me and the tomb, was a man. And he appeared to be naked. And I was shocked. I had no way of knowing how he could possibly have gotten there. And as he approached me, it was getting dark, but I could see him clearly. And it was as if a light was coming from him. And as he approached, he reached out and handed me something, and I reached up and took it as though I were his servant. And as I looked down, I saw that he handed me a white linen napkin, the kind that's placed over the face of those who have died. And I looked up into his eyes, and I knew it was he. I had seen this man many times in the temple. I'd heard him preach, and it was he. It was the one they called Jesus. And I looked back down at the cloth, and then I looked up again, and he was walking off and disappearing into the darkness. I went quickly and I woke up my men. And they had not even been disturbed by any of this. They were still asleep. And I woke them up, and I ordered them to go and find a large stone and one of those great beams that we use at Golgotha to crucify the criminals. And we took that and we used it against that great stone as a lever to roll away that stone. It hadn't been moved because the seals were still there. We rolled away the stone, and I took a torch and I looked inside. And as I looked inside, I saw there on the shelf the folded grave cloths. But there was no body. There was no body. And at that moment, I knew. I knew from that time forward I would never return as captain of the temple guard. Even if Caiaphas could have believed me, which he didn't, I knew that I would from that day forward serve God as a follower of the one they call the Prince of Peace. You see, I had been frozen in fear and battle many times. I know what battle is like. I know what fear is like. I know what facing death is like. But what I experienced there was not fear. But it was a peace that I think I shall never be able to describe. A peace that I hope to experience again in my life. And so from this day forth, I know this is what I will be doing. Following that Prince. Shalom. This is an adaptation from a book called The Christ Commission by Og Mandino, and I really recommend that wonderful work for you. It's a really fascinating story, and that particular chapter really captured my imagination and really spoke to me in lots of ways and on different levels. And it really speaks to me in many ways because I can just imagine what it might have been like for others in that time to experience something like this. And you know, for me, resurrection is a wonderful, beautiful, archetypal story. And it's a story that really is lived out every day almost in all of us, but it also is lived out in each of our lives. The question I have for you today is, what would you do today? What decisions would you make? What choices would you make? What would you do today if you absolutely knew that you would not die? That you could not die? How would you be? What would your life be like? To know, I see some heads nodding because I know that there are some in this group that know that there's a part of us There's an aspect of our being that has not, will not, cannot ever die. There's a part of our being that is eternal. There's a part of our being that is from the essence and of the essence of the divine. We are created in the image and after the likeness of that which creates. We are created in the image and after the likeness of God. And there's a part of us that we know never, ever ends. And so I want to speak to that part some today, but I also want to speak to that part of us that we ask the question, what would our life be like? What would we do if we knew we were going to die today? I think these are two important questions to ask, two valuable questions to ask. And they're not really necessarily different or opposite from each other, because there's a part of us that knows that this physical form will not necessarily live on forever. In fact, it's different than it was yesterday, isn't that right? It's a little different than it was yesterday and the day before. In fact, it's probably different than it was 5 minutes ago, because we're losing cells all the time and we're gaining cells all the time. And what would life be like if we knew that everything was going to change today? And how would we live our life? What decisions will we make, knowing that this is going to end? And it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week. But those are two really valuable, important lessons and questions to ask ourselves. How will I be knowing that ultimately I will live forever, and ultimately I know that this body, this physical being, won't? To me, those are powerful questions, because one of the things I am aware of is that there are those in this room today who have been pronounced dead and have lived many years beyond that pronouncement. You know who you are. I don't have to tell you. Been pronounced dead in some way or another. There are those in this room who've certainly felt dead. Anybody ever felt dead? I think we've all had a place where we felt like we were entombed, haven't we? You may be going through that experience even now. And I think the beauty and the magnificence of this story, of this awareness, this event, this mystery, is the understanding that we can be deeply entombed. You know, I love the 23rd Psalm. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I especially like the part where it talks about the shadow part, because that's pretty much what it is, isn't it? It really is just a shadow. It's not the reality of us. It's not the truth of us. And so I really love this understanding, this archetypal awareness that no matter how dark it seems at times, no matter how challenging it seems, no matter how much we feel like that we've been, anybody ever felt crucified? That's all right, you don't have to raise your hand, it's okay, you don't have to. You ever felt like you were entombed? Of course we have. The thing I'm going to suggest to you and share with you is you also have overcome that. You have already overcome it. Your true nature, the Spirit within you, the presence of God within you has already overcome every challenge that you have been called into this experience to be a part of. You would not have been given this opportunity if there wasn't something within you that had already overcome. That's the power and that's the beauty of this. I want to share with you a poem. I left my glasses back there. Oh, wait a minute. No, here they are. Part of resurrection is seeing beyond appearances, isn't it? There we go. Great. This one is from St. Teresa of Avila. I will just say this. We bloomed in spring. Our bodies are the leaves of God. The apparent seasons of life and death, our eyes can suffer. But our souls, dear, I will just say this forthright, they are God Himself. And He will never perish, we will never perish unless He does. Someone recently, I think it was Laura actually said recently, says, I'll start worrying when God does. I love that. I'll start worrying when God does. You know, life, and it's one of the things that we really teach and talk about in Unity, is that life itself is eternal. It's one of our 12 divine faculties. I won't get into all the other 12. We'll do probably a series on that at some point. But love certainly is one of those. But life itself is one of our divine qualities. And it is something that does not end. I just had this wonderful experience this last week, awareness as I'm thinking about our service here today and the resurrection and what all that is about and the beautiful symbolism of it. And most of you were here this winter, right? It got cold this winter, didn't it? And we actually lost quite a few plants outside because we were not as aware that it would get that cold and didn't know about some of the plants, what could take it and what couldn't. But we had some jasmine out there. We had some really beautiful jasmine bushes, and they were really very lush, and I was constantly having to trim them back. But the cold got them, and they just completely turned brown and dark and crisp, and so I eventually went in and took my trimmers and cut them all the way back down like this on the ground, and I left them there, and I thought, well, we're going to have to dig them up, and we'll plant something else there, and so I left them there, and came out this last week, and they're coming back. They're coming back. It's amazing. It is amazing to me how life goes on. We're leaving this morning, Julie and I, as a matter of fact, and what is that plant that we have in the garage? It's a Christmas plant, isn't it? It's amaryllis, yes. So we have an amaryllis, and we had a bulb sitting in a pot in the garage, dark all the time, most of the time anyway. It's growing back in the garage. I love that. I love that. And one of the things that of course, that the whole thing about Easter is really about this understanding that life really does go on. It really does go on. And there's a whole other level of life when we overcome some of the challenges that we are facing today. And if we allow ourselves to be open to that spirit, what we'll find is that we're being guided and directed in ways that allow us to move through those challenges and to come out of those challenges on a whole nother level of existence and being. I really think that's what Jesus was trying to show us. I really think He was trying to show us the essence of our being and the possibilities of good in our lives. So I invite you to think about those challenges that you're faced with today. Anybody have any? We all have some, don't we? It could be a challenge in our relationship. Anybody ever had any of those? It could be a challenge with our health. It could be a challenge with our finances. It could be a challenge just in life in general. It could be a challenge in just overcoming something. To me, that message is very clear. The overcoming spirit is already there in you, and there's a part of you that has already overcome. I invite you to really take some time over this season to reflect on and to be a part of and to align ourselves, as Paul says, have in you this mind which was in Christ Jesus. Have in you this mind which is in Christ Jesus. Well, think about the mind that it took to overcome that experience. And be that overcomer in your life. And know that those around you have that power as well. The more we can see it in them, the more we actually bring it forth in ourselves. Isn't that true? So happy Easter to you. I hope you'll find this to be a blessing for you, and that you'll take some time to really tune into that awareness within you, where you know and experience that part of you that has already overcome. God bless you. Let's